Good morning everyone, this is John Corley at Plant Based Life, and it's a glorious day here in Sydney. The sun is out, and the purpose of this video is I want to talk about a topic that is very important to me from a personal training perspective and helping clients and just helping people, you know, improve their quality of life basically through good movement, and that's functional movement training. Now, the word functional has been used over the years in lots of different contexts, right? And I think the actual, you know, concept of functional movement training has really been lost because of this, okay? Not in every fitness regime that's out there, but in a lot of them, you know, they use the word functional, and it applies to some of the exercises they do, but not all of them. So when you look at, you know, things like the group exercise classes out there, where they, you know, it's a functional, so-called functional class for 45 minutes mixed in with interval and cardio, and then they've got, you know, up to 20 odd people in there. There's nothing really functional about that, because you're not monitoring the person's movement patterns and you're not seeing how they're going, and it actually creates a situation where injuries can occur. It's the same thing with things like CrossFit, you know. Now there's certain exercises in CrossFit which are great, you know, and if you're at a certain fitness level and you've got that level of movement pattern and you can function at that level, then that's great for you. But generally people who go to CrossFit, they don't have that kind of background, and they don't get assessed properly, and then they end up doing exercises that are really not suitable for what they're doing. There's an airplane going over me here, so I apologise about that. A bit noisy in the background, but I probably should have thought before I started the video. I'm a little bit close to the flight path, but that's okay. These things happen. It's all part of doing these videos on the fly, as they say. Okay, let's get down to the nuts and bolts of it. So, you know, I train people outdoors, and also, you know, I do a mobile training service, and we've got trainers who work for us in other areas. I'm based around Burwood, Summerhill, but I do a mobile service, and I go to other areas. I also teach Pilates in various studios around Sydney, both Reformer and Matt, and then I've got trainers. There are trainers who work for Plant Based Life in Hurstville. We've got a studio in Hurstville, and also on the North Shore and in Bondi as well, and a few other areas. So we've got a lot of areas covered. But the one thing that we stress with all our trainers is that we focus on good functional movement. So by that, we assess people's movement patterns. Now, the first 7 years of your life is when you really get, you know, you use what's called your motor control and cognitive adaptation to learn certain movement patterns. And when you look at young babies, they move perfectly, right? They do a squat, they do it perfectly. Everything they do is perfect. So it isn't until they get to about the age of 4 or 5 and they get into the school system or preschool or wherever they need to go, and they're told to sit down, stand up, sit down, stand up, do whatever they need to do, okay? And they get conditioned out of the movement patterns that they naturally do. And this happens to all of us as humans. And then a lot of us end up, you know, doing jobs where we sit at desks and we're rounded shoulders over a desk, and, you know, we're not utilising any muscles basically in the body. Or people are driving and they're, you know, like this when they're driving. So functional movement is correcting all of these things. And going back to the movement patterns you pick up in the first 7 years of life, some of them can be detrimental. Some of the thoughts that you have towards movement, you might have done a movement when you were that age that you found particularly hard. So, you know, that sticks in your memory. You know, the brain is an amazing thing, and you could have an emotional attachment to that movement which hinders you from carrying it out correctly. Not just a physical limitation, you know, the fascia, which is a web that basically goes from our bottom of our feet all the way up our body to the back, all the way down over our body. It's like a web that goes around our whole body. Well, fascia is one of the most important aspects of movement, and not only the physical part of it getting tight and needs to be loosened up, you know, by various different self-myofascial release techniques or other, you know, massage relief or whatever. Like bone therapy is a good technique for getting relief in that area. But emotions get stored there, stresses and things we go through in life get stored there. So that can hold us back in movement as well. And these are things generally most fitness professionals, you know, they don't really use in their assessment techniques. I mean, what we do at the start when we meet someone, you know, we assess them on a I use a 7-point test. I've done the functional movement systems certification, level 1 and 2, and that particular certification allows you to do a 7-stage test which assesses people for all different types of mobility and weaknesses and muscle imbalances they may have. In regards, there's 7 tests. There's a squat test, a deep squat, an inline lunge, a hurdle step. Each one's testing different parts of the body, you know, mobility in different areas, your suitability for certain exercises. You know, there's also an active leg raise. There's the rotary trunk stability and the rotary and the push-up, and then there's a couple of clearance tests to make sure you're not getting any pain in certain areas as well, like in your shoulders. Now, the main reason for each of these tests is to assess your movement in regards to certain exercises. Like for instance, with the active leg raise, if you got another plane going over, I didn't realise, honestly didn't realise these planes would be coming over. But anyway, yeah, look, if you can't get your leg to a point in the active leg raise, you lay flat on the ground, you lift your leg up past the point, and if you can't get past that point, then you're really not suitable to do a deadlift. Same thing, you do a toe touch where you reach down. If you can't, you're not really suitable to do a deadlift. Now, a deadlift is a useful exercise, and it can be adapted in many ways. You know, you can do a one-legged deadlift to, you know, isolate your glute medius. There's various different ways to use it to strengthen other areas, but these tests are excellent in, you know, assessing where a person is at for certain things. You know, the shoulder mobility test that we do is really good. It's a reach test, and that one tells us, you know, how good a person's shoulder mobility is. But, you know, but as well as functional movement training, you know, and the assessment we're doing, the main concept of it is that every exercise you do makes you engage many different muscles in the body. So you're basically, you know, a lot of traditional compound lifting only really engages the muscle that it targets. Sometimes it engages a few. Deadlifts and squats engage a few more, but yeah, the squat can be a dangerous exercise for a lot of people. You know, I see people and they just can't do a body weight squat. The strange thing is, when they add a little bit of weight, they actually, you know, they compress, and it does force them to engage some of the muscles that they don't engage when they don't have weight. And it looks like they are doing them correctly, but that's a recipe for disaster, because as they progress through higher weights, without that good functional movement basis, they're going to have problems. They're going to have major problems as they get heavier in weight. So, you know, if you see the knees coming in on a squat, you know, then you've got to strengthen their glutes. Their VMO, which is a muscle just above the knee, needs to be strengthened. You know, a lot of the time people don't have core strength to support their back extensors and their lower back. You know, there's a lot of things to look at, and obviously glutes come into that as well. Glutes are, you know, you could do a whole video on glutes on their own. It's such a major stabilisation muscle area, you know. But that's essentially, you know, what functional movement is. It's making sure that you're moving correctly in these before you do exercise, before you increase the reps, before you start increasing the weight. You know, you've got to make sure that you're moving correctly. It's so important, and I see a lot of trainers in gyms don't really take a lot of time to do this, you know. Another thing, obviously, because I teach Pilates, and you know, I come from that, I look at that approach, because there's a big link between functional movement training and Pilates. The main big link is they both work on stabilising the core and bringing the core into as many exercises as possible. With functional movement training, you do a lot of exercise where you're using cables, kettlebells, TRX, you know, dumbbells, where you're moving through different planes of motion. You're using upper and lower body, and your core comes in every time. And that way, you're getting a full body workout in every, you know, exercise routine you do. But most importantly, you're focusing primarily on the core. And I like to focus on that in every exercise, because if you get your core strong, the rest of your body is going to follow. It's a very important area. And by saying core, I'm not talking about where you'll hear some trainers say, you know, embrace your core. For the person who's not in tune, who's never done this before, they don't have any idea what embrace the core means. You know, you've got to break it down and explain exactly what the core is. The core is comprised of many, many muscles. It's not just embrace your abs, you know. The deep stabilisation muscles that we use in Pilates that are also important in all exercise, is to have your pelvic floor muscle and your transverse abdominals switched on, which will help with your pelvic stability and give you spinal mobility. Then you've got all your other core muscles here, rectus abdominis, you've got your obliques, external obliques. There's so many here, right, that people need to be aware of exactly what the core is, and what you're doing. So pulling your belly button to your spine, only having your pelvic floor switched on at 30%, all these things. And this isn't something you learn overnight. You don't just learn this overnight. But the most important thing is, when you do all of this, it helps stabilize you so that when you do exercise, you move so much better, and then you've got a lesser risk of injury and more chance of correcting an injury you may already have. So the other very important thing is shoulders down and back. Have your lats engaged, your core switch on, to be told about, your chin slightly tucked in. Glutes, always have your glutes nice and switched on, so these things are all really important, and the other thing that we see a lot, so common, especially if people drive a lot or work behind a desk, is tight hamstrings. So we have to do a lot of stretching for that, and there's a lot of functional movement techniques that help with that. So this is a very brief intro into functional movement training. I'm going to be doing many more videos where we demo a lot of these exercises, and a lot of the other trainers that work with us will demo a lot of exercises they're doing with clients, and we're going to be putting out a lot of information this year, so stay tuned. Check out www.plantbasedlife.com.au, and peace, movement and plants.